We're still a little over a month out before Donald Trump ascends to the White House for the second time, and things are starting to shape up a little bit more on what some of his major foreign policy objectives may be. One of the ones that's in the Wall Street Journal today is that Trump team weighs options, including airstrikes, to stop Iran's nuclear program. Now, on top of all the other things roiling in the Middle East, and of course, most of the focus, as you've seen on our previous shows, has been on the Russia-Ukraine war and some of the things that Trump's going to be doing there. This would almost seem to be going in the opposite direction, whereas he's going in the Russia-Ukraine war to try to get that war off the table and ending. Now then, there's apparently some discussion among some of his team that they should maybe be escalating and ramping up in Iran. And listen, this is not a major issue because it's not a standalone thing. If there's one thing we've learned about what's been going on in the Middle East, though it's always been the case in large measure, nothing is isolated. Things all add together, and especially you've got Russia and China really locked in with being supportive of Iran now that are in BRICS. So this is no longer just an isolated case, as say, for example, Syria was, because Syria didn't have a lot of other connections outside of that. That Iran or that Israel had to worry about when they, helped facilitate, along with Turkey, the destruction of al-Assad in Syria. This one is a lot different, and I'm hoping that at least some of the people on Trump's transition teams are aware of this and advise him properly. Because it's at least what's being reported so far, it seems like that they're thinking things are going to be easier than they really are. And that is a dangerous place on top of the mess that's already going on over there. And I want to take a look at some of the specific things that are being reported in that article. Gary, if you can toss that first one up there with the call out. There are, at least according to what's being reported, there are two paths that he's being advised on. One path involves augmenting military pressure by sending more U.S. forces, warplanes, and ships to the Middle East. The U.S. could also sell advanced weapons to Israel, such as bunker-busting bombs, strengthen its offensive firepower to take Iranian nuclear facilities offline. And then the alternative path is to seek the use of the threat of military force, i.e. from the United States, especially paired with U.S.-imposed sanctions, to drive Tehran into accepting a diplomatic resolution. Now, I want to talk a little bit about those, because they say those are two paths. Those aren't really two. They're all military. There's no diplomacy involved here. And what's not explained in the article anywhere, and never has been that I've seen anywhere, when they say that they want Iran to accept a diplomatic path, what do you even mean? What is the objective? What do you want Iran to do? Because in practice, what they're actually saying is we want Iran to give aid on unconditional surrender. That's what you're saying. Now, that is really important. It's not just a minor issue, because however you define that diplomatic path, that is going to tell you what is going to be the more likely outcome. If your diplomatic path means that we want the other side to unconditionally surrender and do everything that we want, then that is almost certainly, like probably something just south of 0% chance that it's going to happen. Iran is not going to surrender and just hand over itself. I mean, they've had all this force, all this pressure, all this economic pressure for decades, and they've not given it up. I don't know why anybody thinks that they will suddenly do so now, but they aren't likely. If that doesn't happen, then that means path one or path two is option. Either we'll support Israel attacking and destroying Iran, or will potentially join in with that. And as you see, even in the headline of the article there, potentially using airstrikes. And I think that part of the reason as to why maybe people are getting a little bit more cocky about this is because of Syria's fall. And really, and you talk about things before that with Israel knocking out Hamas, or severely degrading them, not destroying, but severely degrading them. Israel has, no kidding, absolutely straight up militarily significantly weakened Hezbollah. They have significantly weakened the Houthis in Yemen. You hear a lot less from them these days because they have had some severe shots sent to them by the United States and Israel as well. And of course, now all of a sudden Syria is taken off the plate. So that leaves, from one perspective, Iran now isolated in there, and people are thinking, okay, we've taken all these other ones off the chessboard. Now it's time to take Iran off. So you can see from one perspective where people may say, hey, this seems like a good idea. But Gary, toss that second headline up there, if you would, with the call out. This is part of the thinking that also concerns me a little bit. The military strike option against the nuclear facilities is now under more serious review by some members of his transition team who are weighing the fall of the regime of President Bashar al-Assad, Tehran's ally in Syria, the future of U.S. troops in the region, and Israel's decimation of the regime proxy militias, Hezbollah and Hamas. So you see, they're also saying the same thing on Trump's team even. They're saying, man, look at all this success. See how good military force is? You don't have to worry about negotiations. You don't have to worry about dealing with anybody in a win-win kind of a deal. No, it's a we win, you lose situation. And the thinking of too many people is that, hey, if we keep going down this path, then we can just militarily defeat everybody. We don't have to give anything to anyone. All the people will be in our favor. Everything will work out the way we want it to. That is a very, very dangerous, because it's inaccurate. That is looking through a lens that's about an inch away from the end of your nose. Now, for sure, tactically especially, even operationally, actually tactically and operationally, not maybe, Israel has wreaked exceptional destruction and damage on all those foes in the region that we've seen. And John Bolton was on News Nation recently saying the exact same thing, that because of all these people have fallen, there's no reason to worry about diplomacy. He thinks Israel should just go ahead and take out Iran right now, believing that, well, once you take the Iranian regime out, then we're good to go. But let me tell you something here. Take the lens from a little bit more than the end of your nose and go back out a little bit further. Let's use a wide angle lens to look on this through more time than just what's in the near term, in the next year or two or even 5. Let's start off with Hamas. Hamas has been the most degraded of anybody because of the nonstop destruction of what's going on there, and the wholesale destruction of the entire Gaza Strip, and their ability to even sustain life of all of the Palestinians. Yes, the Hamas organization that existed on October 7th of 2023 has been virtually wiped out. No question about that. But here's the thing. Here's what too few people are thinking about and understanding. Why did 10/7 happen in the first place? Was it out of nowhere? Where the Palestinians just sitting there and they're just evil? And the Hamas side, especially all those terrorists, they're just evil. So they just couldn't wait to they just woke up one morning and went, man, let's just go slaughter a bunch of people for no reason, because that's how it's being portrayed. That's not how it was. I mean, even in the near term, prior to October, just the months before, the Israeli security forces and the Israeli settlers were killing hundreds, plural, of Palestinian people in the West Bank and in Gaza. Hundreds of them. They have no freedoms for anything, no justice. There's no path for them to seek retribution for it. Nothing that's legitimate anyway. And the killings just continued on. And this of course precedes the decades prior to that, when all the way back to the 1947, when they started being forcibly ejected and murdered in large numbers by the Israelis as they were having what they call as the War of Independence. These are all facts, folks. It's unpalatable to hear for a number of people, especially in the West, who are very good friends with Israel, and I understand that. But you have to, if you're going to be honest, and if you want something good for Israel, you have to start off by being frank on what actually has happened. These are the facts. These conditions help set the stage for the explosion on October 7th. And let me be clear as I can be. I still unequivocally condemn the terrorist act where the Palestinian people went in there and started murdering civilians. Absolutely, they needed to have been brought to justice. The result has, of course, been out of all proportion to anything that would meted out justice. And there was a path to how to get justice and retain the support of even the Arab regimes, as well as the United States and the rest of the world at large, that could have been followed. I've written on that before. I won't go through it again. But the point being right now is it wasn't done. It wasn't done the right way. And now there's just been this wholesale slaughter with the complete physical destruction, intentional, of the ability of the Palestinian people to sustain life. And Tens of thousands of innocent people, primarily women and children, have been killed. Now, what do you think the survivors of all of these casualties are going to do in the future? Do you think that, yes, their spirit is broken, and now then they'll just go quietly into the night, and Israel will either give them tents to live in forever in the Gaza Strip, or they'll succeed finally in getting them ejected completely from the Gaza Strip, all 2 million of them? Just get them out somewhere. Maybe even annex the West Bank. Trump may well do that, for example. That's one of the things many want anyway. Whether he will or not remains to be seen. That's not going to happen, folks. If the conditions that existed in the summer and in the years prior to October 7th caused that explosion, that is nothing compared to the seeds that have been sown now against Israel, against these people, whether they're somehow able to stay in the Gaza Strip or whether they eventually go somewhere else. I assure you that the seeds of future Israeli violence against Israel are being planted already, and they will grow. They will grow. And now then you add on that what's going on in Lebanon, what has been going on in Lebanon, with a massive destruction, even in Beirut City, just wanton destruction everywhere. And all the stuff that happened in the south, and specifically against the Hezbollah, and all the survivors of the leadership that still remain, and those who are now elevating. All of these people are never going to just go quietly. They're just going to be planning and preparing for the next round. And unless you literally wipe every single man, woman, and child off the map and kill them all, their survivors will do it. It's been happening for decades and for centuries in the region. And it's irrational to think anything different is going to happen. So yes, you can celebrate if you choose to do so and say that tactically and operationally in the near term, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Syria have been decimated, and they now pose no immediate threat to the Israelis besides acts of individual terror, which are still going to be on the table. But they won't be able to mount anything for a long time. So now we look at what so many in the West here, General Kellogg being one of them, call the crown jewel. And that is, as Naftali Bennett has said, the head of the octopus, Iran. That's what everybody's focused on now. And this idea is, because we've had all this military success here, now all we got to do is take out the head, and then peace is going to reign. Only it's not going to. And we also need to understand that things are not that simple with Iran either. Yes, all of these proxies of Iran have been hammered, and without question, their southern flank has been badly weakened. But that's not their only flank. They have additional flanks. So they have outflanked, they have outsmarted us with a lot of these sanctions that we put on them after Trump put them on following the 2018 withdrawal from the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. They found new customers. And so India is one of them. China is a big one. So now then they have a revenue stream, and they have classes out there. They've also joined BRICS, which now means China and Russia have an incentive and a motivation to make sure they stay there. Russia, especially because of the weapons procurement with the drones and other kinds of cooperation militarily with Iran. They're not just going to give that up. They gave up the issue in Syria. They chose not to fight for that. They could have, but they chose not to. But now then with Iran, that's a different matter, because they have a direct benefit from the Iran as long as that regime stays in power. So it's unlikely that they would be passive in doing nothing to allow them to fall as they did Bashar al-Assad. That is very different, and we need to understand that. China, likewise, they get about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day from Iran, and they would not be keen on having that suddenly interrupted and suddenly stopped. And then, of course, even just the economic issue with BRICS, China and Russia, if they allowed a BRICS member to be destroyed and took no action to it, then that would undercut the credibility from all the rest of BRICS and put the whole venture at risk. And it's very unlikely that Russia and China are about to risk the stability and the growing aspect of BRICS as a counterweight to the Western G7 economic world at its very beginning here, because it's just now starting to grow. And it's unlikely that China would risk all that Russia would risk all that by allowing Iran to fall. Those are the things that need to be considered by the Trump team before they think about any action going forward. Here's the truth of it. Iran is a very weak player, has always been a weak player. At most, they're a nuisance in the region. They can cause trouble, they can cause difficulties and challenges here and there, but it's not an existential threat. It doesn't threaten our security. Anything they could ever do, we could handle, and we have. Since their inception in 1978 or 1979, that's how it's been. They've never threatened us. Anytime they've ever tried, we've been able to put them back in a box. So there is no need to go in further and to risk war. And even though Israel has been weakened, Iran has been weakened, they do have the capacity to strike. They can do lots of damage in the Strait of Hormuz, for example. They have a substantial long-range weapon systems, which they have demonstrated to effect in Saudi Arabia, for example. They have the capacity, if pushed into a corner, to cause severe harm and damage to American interest in the region, to global interest in the region within the range, and especially to American troops who are on the ground in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, who shouldn't be. And actually elsewhere too. They have their range. They can range a great many of the American troops over there if they're pushed into a corner. If they're not, then they're not going to. They're going to retain all that so that they have some kind of deterrence capacity. So they're not going to launch off into something that would only give an easy opportunity for the U.S. to unleash its full arsenal on them and crush them. They want to prevent that very outcome. So they're not going to spawn it. So as long as we don't do something stupid, they're not going to go into any paths, into any kind of a military adventurism. Now, what the possibility could be, though, is that because of all these activities, we push Iran into the very thing that we claim to want to avoid at the most, which is a nuclear breakout. Now, there are some who don't want to even worry about that. Now, I've been talking all so far about primarily what's inside Trump's transition team, what's pushing him in there. But there are plenty of people outside. John Bolton's one I mentioned a couple of days ago. Jack Keane is another of the big flag bearers.
President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in conjunction with the Arabs, issue a written ultimatum to the Supreme Leader. And number one, tell them, dismantle your nuclear enterprise, verified, and by a date certain, and verified by IAEA inspectors, regional inspectors, and U.S. inspectors. Cease and desist from supporting your proxies and tell them to cease attacks, period. In the same ultimatum letter, tell them what the alternative is. Sanctions much greater than what the Trump administration did during their first term. We would have sanctions in place with the goal to bankrupt your economy. Secondly, we will conduct surgical attacks to cripple your nuclear enterprise and reduce your rocket and missile arsenal. There are other options you can do. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, to be frank, would rather not try to even go with the voluntary dismantling and would prefer to do something kinetically to take down a nuclear enterprise and rockets and missiles. You could go with another option, do the sanctions first, and use that as leverage to get him to dismantle his enterprise. We have an opportunity to neutralize this country once and for all.
See, it's the allure. We have a chance to do it once and for all. And that is absurd to the highest degree. It's hard to overstate how insane that view is and how harmful to our interests should Trump listen to it. Jack Keane is wrong, dead flat ass wrong. There's no question about it. Anyone who knows anything about the Middle East knows there is no once and for all solution to any problem at all. The best you can do is manage and navigate what the conditions are today. Because the conditions are like a sea. They're constantly changing, and storms come in and squalls come out of nowhere, and then they go away, and then there's relative calm for a while, and then there's a new centuries, folks. Centuries it's been like that. And there is no evidence whatsoever that some kind of military conquest would change. Does he not know that there has been battles and wars from outside and inside fought throughout the Middle East for millennia? None of them has been successful at destroying anything. It's only a temporary condition that changes with the tides. So for him to claim that this will solve the problem once and for all means he is dangerously unaware of how the Middle East works. Do not listen to that man. You need to listen to somebody who's going to say, okay, here's all the realities. What can we do at the lowest possible cost to get us the most benefit? That's what we should be doing. And to try and change the nature of the Middle East, to try and get the Iranian regime to do something that no rational regime would ever do, to include anything that was headed by Jack Keane, John Bolton. They would never, under any circumstances, if the situation was reversed, do what they're advocating this regime do. So what they're doing is setting the stage for more conflict. That's what we're having here. That's what this is all about. And it's not just Jack Keane. It's also in the New York Times. I think it's today, actually. You have Friedman, who's trying to push in this same direction. Thomas Friedman there from the New York Times, as he writes today and says, hey, memo to the Secretary of State designate Rubio, you may not realize it yet, but if confirmed, your first big challenge as President Donald Trump's top diplomat may persuade him to abandon all of the isolationist, we're going to talk about that in a second, America first, not so sure we want to stay in NATO, who needs allies, who cares about shithole countries, rhetoric that Trump is known for, so you can help with, dare I say it, nation building in Syria. I mean, these people are just, it's almost comical. It would be comical if not for the catastrophic impact that they've had. And then, of course, Friedman does what all of these neocons or liberal interventionists, because they're hardly any different, used in different titles, but they have the same thing. They always want us to go do something with military power somewhere. He says if we don't, he continues on in that same article, competition within Syria and over Syria by outsiders will spill across the whole region. It will be a forever war that will open the way for the reemergence of ISIS and can easily destabilize the frail democracies in Iraq and the monarchy in Jordan and suck Israel into Syria, for crying out loud. Oh my God, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. I mean, that's kind of what the rest of the article goes on to say. That's what they want to tell you. My God, if you don't intervene here, if you don't try and solve the problem in another country, then you're going to end up with, catastrophe. Oblivious to the fact that because we have followed Thomas Friedman's advice, because we have done what the Jack Keanes and the John Boltons and ad infinitum, David Petraeus, we've listened to all these people. We have done these policies, and it has been absolute catastrophe as a result, both for the target nations and for us. So we went into Saddam Hussein under false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction. We eliminated him, and what happened to that country? That country, which had been perversely, ironically, an ally of the United States earlier against Iran and had been a counterweight on the border with Iran, very much against them, now is basically a vassal state of Iran. Congratulations. Well done. Well done, guys. That a way to help out Iran. You wanted to talk about when to weaken Iran. You did everything in the world to help Iran at the cost of hundreds of thousands of people probably that were killed, thousands of American soldiers that were killed in the process, hundreds of thousands more that suffered traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, etc., that are still being treated to this day, all for nothing. We did not gain anything from that. Not a thing did we gain from Saddam Hussein falling from there. We should have never even been involved with it. And because our security was never at risk for that. It was a lie from the beginning. It was exposed as a lie. And yet here we are still there to this day. And Iran is a benefactor of all that. What about Libya? The Obama's decision to go into Libya. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. What a terrible guy. What did that do? It basically, a civil war is to this day still raging on and off in Libya, where there are two competing governments saying that they're legitimate. And so it's just nothing but chaos in the region. And now, again, going back to Obama, the whole Syria thing, that we wanted to take that government out. We wanted regime change and did everything we could, funding all of these Al-Qaeda-backed terror groups, which we otherwise claim are bad, but we've been helping them, along with Israel to some degree, and certainly Turkey to a large degree, our NATO ally. And now then, after 13 long years of misery for the Syrian people, now Bashar al-Assad is gone, and an Al-Qaeda-linked guy is in charge of them. Congratulations, Thomas Friedman and all of these other folks. You've done a great job, again, helping out our enemy. And you want Trump to come in now and to do it again. So it's not bad enough that we've happened. See, that's what's so perverse. And again, it kind of is comical in a really bad sort of way, that here's Friedman warning, if you don't go into Syria and try to fix this from the outside in a country that has all kinds of different groups inside of it, and even HTS is an agglomeration of a number of different groups which may turn on each other. And then you have the Syrian National Army. You have other Turkish-backed groups. You have the Syrian Democratic Force. This cauldron is not even come close to settling from the fall of Bashar al-Assad. And you're talking about wanting the United States to somehow go and fix this. It's absurd to the highest degree. And then when he claims that if we don't, all these bad things are going to happen. My God, have you looked at the wreckage behind you when we have followed that? I mean, it's so obvious to anyone who's willing to look at the actual facts and look beyond 1 inch from their nose that it's insane and it's absurd to do that. But unfortunately, it seems that Trump is given serious consideration to this. And he had some really bad advisors in the first time. John Bolton was one of them. Mike Pompeo was another one. We're going to see his name pop up again here in just a second. But listen, part of the problems that we have now goes back to the Trump's decision that he was led into by these advisors in 2018 to get out of the JCPOA. The JCPOA was an Obama thing in 2015. So automatically that means Trump's going to hate it because all the Republicans hated it, right? So that deal said, all right, we're going to put some significant constraints on the Iranian nuclear program, because even Obama, everybody has always said no nuclear weapon for Iran. But now then they had a diplomatic possibility that says, here's how we can do it. There's going to be significant constraints on Iran, but in exchange for them doing something we want, then we're going to do something they want. And we're going to give them these things here. Now, keeping with their tradition, especially of all the neocons throughout government, this is a uniparty deal. It's not even just the Republicans. Nope, can't have that. There can only be negatives for Iran. There can't be anything positive. They can't get something. They can only give something. That's it. We take and then we demand more. That's how it works. And so they despised the JCPOA because it did give something to Iran. But we also got something significant. We got the IAEA inspectors in there that were now monitoring all kinds of things and all of these declared sites. They had capacity, even in some of the undeclared sites, to be able to tell if something was going on there, though it was imperfect. And that's what a lot of the critics, and Trump specifically, when he announced his decision to get out of the JCPOA, that there were possibilities that they could be doing things elsewhere that weren't covered in that, or that there was a sunset clause, and in 10 years, things could change and they would no longer be constrained by these deals. But the fact, and let me underscore that, the decidable fact that you can measure, quantifiable, is that it radically reduced the stockpile of nuclear fissile material that they had. It dramatically lowered the amount of centrifuges that they could have for civilian purposes. And it lowered the maximum percent rate that they could move up to is at 3.67%. Very small, again, mainly for possible civilian uses or research, et cetera. And there was lots of mechanisms in place to make sure that that was happening. And we confirmed that that was the case. But that wasn't enough for President Trump. So he came in May 2018 and said this.
In just a short period of time, the world's leading state sponsor of terror will be on the cusp of acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. Therefore, I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. As we exit the Iran deal, we will be working with our allies to find a real, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear threat. This will include efforts to eliminate the threat of Iran's ballistic missile program, to stop its terrorist activities worldwide, and to block its menacing activity across the Middle East.
Yeah, see, they don't play that very much on Fox anymore, or any network for that matter, even CNN and MSNBC. No one ever talks about when he claimed that we were going to get it. Here's all these good things that are going to happen. Have any of those things happened, folks? Any of them? Is Iran more in a box? Are they more constrained? Is there more freedom and democracy in the Middle East? Is anything moving in a positive direction at all? The answer is self-evident. It's gone even worse. And in fact, that was 2 years after that. There was a situation where Trump, again, listening to his advisors, I think Pompeo was one of the major one behind this as well, said, hey, you know what would be cool? Let's take out basically their chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff equivalent. It's a rough equivalent, but basically General Soleimani, been around for a long time, was very, very effective and good at what he did for Iran. So they're like, you know what? Let's kill that guy and see what happens. And so as a result, Trump took him out and did what he was advised, and then he went on national television and said this.
As long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
And see, that's more important than anything else. He went on to explain there that as a result of our assassination of Soleimani in Iraq at the airport outside of Baghdad, then Iran fired a bunch of ballistic missiles at the Al-Assad, I think it was Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, wounded a bunch of Americans, didn't kill anybody. And I was worried at the time that might have been the spark that started a war between the U.S. and Iran. But fortunately, Trump did not listen to his advisors and didn't take the bait and go over that last hurdle. And even though there was, I think, it turned out to be 100 traumatic brain injuries, among others, in the American side, Trump chose not to respond further. And I think they had a deal. They said, let's just let that be enough and let's let it calm down. And that's exactly what happened for then. But has recently been admitted or revealed by the IAEA. Now, remember, one of the holdover things from the JCPOA, which the Americans got out, but many in the Europe didn't, and Iran itself never formally withdrew from it. So those IAEA inspectors are still there. Well, they came out recently and said, this is actually, I believe, in November report here. They said as of 26 October, Iran's total enrichment uranium stockpile was 6,604.4 kilograms. And this figure represents an increase of, you can see the rest of it there. So that was a big, large increasement. Well, as Dan DePetris said in an article in the same month in Chicago Tribune, he wrote that the Trump administration officials at the time, from the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to National Security Advisor John Bolton, insisted that sanctions were not only having a massive impact on the Iranian economy, but would also push Tehran to eventually come to the table. Obviously, that never happened here. But one of the other things really highlighted from that opinion that Dan wrote, we've had him on our show before. He's one of my fellow colleagues at Defense Priorities. He wrote that the more advanced centrifuges were installed as time went on to try to put pressure on us to come back to the negotiations. Iran said, hey, we're going to increase our centrifuges and increase the percentages that we manufacture nuclear material up to. And now that it's up to 60%, which is apparently in this technical terms here, just one step away from nuclear weapons grade processing. So it was, to remind you, 3.67% under the deal before Trump got out. Now then, it has increased to 6,604, and it was virtually none before that. So it is now, according to Dan, who told me in an email earlier today, 22 times more refined material than existed when Trump got out of the JCPOA. That's your legacy. When Trump listens to guys like Pompeo or Bolton or Jack Keane, this is the cost. This is the result. They claim that it will help, and yet there was no help. All those things Trump said in that speech was because that's what he was told would happen. That's what his advisors convinced him was happen. And in fact, almost the opposite in every category happened, except it was worse with the reprocessing materials, because now then claiming that Iran will never have a bomb. And the reason I put that clip in there is because Trump has now tied his hands. He has said they're not going to have a bomb, but everything that's been going on all under the Biden administration continues to shove Iran into a place by literally just shredding all of their forward proxies that they've had, kind of their forward defense with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, and Syria, this so-called arc of resistance that was going on. Now then, they're all gone. So now then, what does Iran have? Consider this. They are at a position to where they have to decide, should we finally take that last step and develop a nuclear weapon, or should we completely surrender and give all of our sovereignty away and do whatever's asked? Because that's when they say a negotiated settlement, quote, bring them back to the table. That's what they mean. You see already the Trump administration has been very clear. When they say negotiate a better deal, they mean that we take everything and we give nothing. Nobody on the planet that has the capacity is going to do that. Just imagine Muammar Gaddafi. I mentioned him earlier. He was in a similar place, and he came to the conclusion with the Bush administration, maybe it would be better to go ahead and surrender our nuclear program, and we will dismantle all that and give you all of our stuff so that we don't have a nuclear program anymore. And then when they didn't have any of that, then of course the Obama administration comes in, and ends up being murdered on the streets because we helped an uprising against him with air power and several other states, etc. Now, with that history, directly with the Trump administration, everything they've seen with the Biden administration, and now then they have to look back over here and they see the Libyan example. What do you think the chances are that Iran is going to go, sure, you know what? Wow, we've seen all these guys get knocked out. I want to live. So whatever your terms are, we'll capitulate and we'll surrender. Jack Keane, Linson, basically an ultimatum. Okay, sure, Jack, whatever you guys want. Here, take all of our stuff. What do you think they're going to do? You going to do that? Or that they're, according to the CIA, as of yesterday, I think I saw the report, they could, because of all this material they have, they could make the decision and then execute within days, a handful of days, not even a week, actually have enough processed materials for 4 nuclear weapons. And then, according to other reports, within 2 months, they could have it weaponized onto a delivery means. And they already have the vehicles that can be outfitted and equipped to be able to carry that. And what are the chances that they could hide that from the IE for just 2 months? I would wager pretty high. So you see, by continuing to go down this road, we're telling Iran the only way you're going to have any kind of freedom and deterrence against the U.S. is to go to a nuclear weapon. We claim that's the last thing we want. And yet we're doing everything in our power to push them in a position to where that's the only thing they have left. That the only way they can defend themselves against this onslaught of Israel, which has been wiping out everybody in the region, and the U.S., which has global capability, is to go to a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's the stark reality. I don't care what anybody wants or what they think or what they claim. Those are the stark, on the ground realities. And if you don't deal with what's reality, it will rear up and hit you in the face on a day when you don't want it to. And we may be doing a channel here or a show on our channel where all of a sudden, breaking news, Iran has tested a nuclear weapon. That's where we're headed to. And now then, because Trump has declared openly that I will never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, now that he has botched himself into a corner to where his hands are tied, and he either has to be seen as being the one to capitulate or to escalate and ramp up and now then go to war with Iran. And of course, now that's a whole new problem. Jack Keane talked about it, and that would be the case here with Trump. The Constitution and the 1973 War Powers Act are unambiguous that President Trump or any American president cannot take unilateral action to take America to war. That's called a king. That's called a despot that has unilateral power over the armed forces. And we have in our law that does not exist for the president of the United States. So to do that, he would have to come to Congress first. Now, Congress is a terrible place. It's turned into a bunch of weak-backed vassals, and they may end up doing this. Who knows? But it would require that. And that, like the last time that was ever tried was 2013 when Obama said, I'm going to go to the Congress and get authorization to strike Syria. And Congress said, oh, hell no, because the American people said, oh, hell no, we're not going to get into a war with Syria. There was no point in that. So that was the last time that there may have been a chance, because the next time there may not be one. We'll have to wait and see how that works out. But if some of Trump's Pompeo is not in the Trump orbit now. Bolton is not in the Trump orbit, but General Kellogg is. And that's what worries me. When you see what General Kellogg has said on this subject, and he's one of the inside guys advising Trump now, you can see why I'm a little bit worried. Here's what he said on Fox News a little bit of time ago when Israel, I think it was back in October, when Israel was thinking about attacking because they had been hit in retaliation by Iran.
Israel. Now, when Israel retaliates and goes after Iran, will we participate in that attack? Will we help?
Well, we're not going to help kinetically. We're going to hold their coats. We're not doing a very good job at that. We probably should be full square behind them, and we're not. But we can provide them diplomatic support. We can provide them supply chain support. In other words, replenish the bomb loads they've got or the things they expend in the fight. But the biggest thing we can do is give them diplomatic support. We shouldn't create this equilibrium that there's good on both sides. No, we should be full square behind Israel. And we need to tell the world that. Stuart, we haven't done that. When you
that's probably enough right there. He just goes on a little bit further to talk about, what we should have been doing all along. But you saw him say there an interesting point at the beginning of that. He says, well, we probably won't engage kinetically, though we should. That's what we should. That's what we should have been doing all along. So he's already on record as saying that if he had been advising Biden at the time, he would have said, go full square in. And he said that's what they should have been doing there as before the election. Well, now then it's after the election, and now then he's been designated as one of Trump's guys, and you can see that he's still got this mentality of what's been going on with Russia and Ukraine in that, yeah, just give Israel all of our bombs and everything else, and our hands are going to be clean. We won't be involved with it, but we'll give them all the diplomatic cover. But folks, that's doing everything except pulling the trigger. But you give the weapons and everything else. That only works to shield somebody in their minds, but not in reality. And I'm concerned that that's the guy that's advising President Trump now going forward, because General Kellogg is either oblivious or he's just ignorant. I don't know which, but none of those things that I talked about at the outset about the fact that this could shove Iran into doing what we don't want them to do, which is to actually have a nuclear weapon, or it could put us in a position to where China and Russia, who will not allow Israel to suffer the same thing that Bashar al-Assad did, that this could expand beyond the scope of just whether it's Iran and Israel, etc. See, there's so much at stake here. This is a big deal, folks, and something we need to be watching very carefully. We will definitely be continuing to track on this situation here, especially we're still a little bit over a month away before Trump takes office, but we'll definitely be watching and keeping a very close eye on this. And I'll just tell you that I think it's a coin flip whether Israel themselves launches something and takes this out of Trump's hands to even do. Because there's been lots of movement within Israel, certainly a lot of commentary inside Israel that says, yeah, Netanyahu, this is what you need to take care of this right now while we can, and send a message, whatever, and destroy their nuclear capacity. So I think it's a 50-50 shot that Israel will do it on their own before we get into kind of further tie Trump's hands to, because can you imagine any scenario where Israel gets into a shooting match with Iran, Trump comes into office and says, you guys are on your own. I'm not going to get involved with this. No, there's virtually none. So that's why I'm worried about the Netanyahu trying to really forestall all of those possibilities and take an action first. And based on what he's been doing recently with Syria and all this other stuff, even after Assad fell, it seems pretty reasonable to think that that's a serious consideration for them. We'll wait and see. We will definitely stay on top of this for you and let you know any developments we get in any of these things. Come back and join us, by the way, here in just a little while. Biden is fast-tracking more war in Ukraine. We're going to look back at what's going on before Trump even comes into office. How much worse can Biden try to make it? And we have a special guest from the United Kingdom on with us today. Well, it'll be a first-time guest. I won't reveal his name until you come and see him, but we're looking really forward to it. And we will see you at 1 p.m. So that's about 30 minutes from now on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.